Trump panics as allies refuse warships. Will Hormuz stay blocked forever? Iran defiant, oil surging to 106 plus. Is Trump's war completely backfiring? Welcome to Power Clash Report. We are breaking down a crisis that is unfolding in real time, with stakes that reach from the Persian Gulf to your local gas pump. Right now, the Strait of Hormuz, the world's most critical oil choke point, is reportedly blocked. Iran has vowed to keep it closed. The United States is calling for a multinational naval response, and allies are saying no. Former President Trump, a central figure in this escalating drama, is reportedly in panic mode as his strategy for reopening the strait meets unexpected resistance. Oil prices have surged past $106 per barrel. Markets are jittery, and the question on everyone's mind is simple but profound. Is this the moment a regional dispute tips into a global economic shock? Stay with me until the end. We are moving beyond the headlines to examine what is actually happening in the Strait of Hormuz, why key U.S. allies are hesitating to commit warships, what Iran's blocked forever claim really means, and how this crisis could impact your wallet, your job, and the stability of the global order. This is not just about geopolitics. It is about the fragile systems that deliver energy, goods, and security to billions of people, and what happens when one narrow stretch of water threatens to break them all. Let us begin with the facts. The Strait of Hormuz is a narrow waterway, only 21 miles wide at its narrowest point, connecting the Persian Gulf to the Gulf of Oman and the Arabian Sea. According to the U.S. Energy Information Administration, approximately 21 million barrels of oil per day pass through this strait. That is roughly 20% of global petroleum consumption. It is also the primary export route for liquefied natural gas from Qatar, the world's largest LNG exporter. When the Strait of Hormuz is disrupted, the world feels it immediately. Reports emerging on March 16, 2026, indicate that Iran has taken steps to restrict navigation through the strait. Iranian naval forces have reportedly deployed mine-laying vessels, positioned fast attack craft in strategic choke points, and issued warnings to commercial shipping to avoid the area. Iranian state media has quoted officials stating that the strait will remain blocked forever until certain political conditions are met. Conditions that include an end to U.S.-Israeli military operations against Iranian territory and the lifting of key economic sanctions. These are significant claims. They represent a shift from previous Iranian rhetoric, which typically framed the threat to close Hormuz as a last resort option, not a sustained policy. Now let us examine the U.S. response. According to multiple diplomatic and defense sources, the Trump administration has been actively lobbying key allies, particularly in Europe and the Gulf, to contribute warships to a multinational naval task force aimed at reopening the strait. The proposed mission would involve mine-clearing operations, escort duties for commercial tankers, and a visible show of force to deter further Iranian escalation. However, these efforts have reportedly met with significant resistance. Several European NATO allies have expressed concerns about the legal basis for such an operation, the risk of escalation, and the potential for civilian casualties. Gulf Arab states, while supportive of freedom of navigation, are reportedly wary of becoming direct participants in a conflict that could invite Iranian retaliation against their own energy infrastructure. This is where the claim that Trump is panicking enters the narrative. While panic is a strong word that may reflect political rhetoric more than operational reality, the underlying dynamic is real. The United States is facing a coalition-building challenge at a moment of acute crisis. Without allied participation, a U.S.-only naval operation in the confined waters of the Persian Gulf would be more risky, more costly, and more politically isolating. It would also send a signal to adversaries that American power can be countered by dividing its alliances. This is a strategic vulnerability that any administration would take seriously. Let us talk about the economics, because this is where the impact becomes personal. Oil prices have already responded to the uncertainty. Brent crude has surged past $106 per barrel, a level not seen since the early stages of the Ukraine conflict. For consumers, this translates directly to higher prices at the pump. In the United States, the national average for regular gasoline could rise by 30 to 50 cents per gallon within weeks if the disruption persists. For businesses, higher fuel costs mean increased expenses for transportation, manufacturing, and logistics, costs that are often passed on to consumers. For developing nations that rely on affordable energy imports, the risk is not just inflation, but social unrest. This is how a crisis in a narrow strait can affect your household budget, your job security, and your community's stability. Now, let us address Iran's blocked forever claim. From a strategic perspective, this language is significant. It suggests a shift from temporary coercion to sustained denial. However, capability must be distinguished from intent. Iran possesses the asymmetric tools to disrupt traffic in the Strait of Hormuz: naval mines, anti-ship missiles, fast attack craft, and drones. It has demonstrated these capabilities in exercises and limited operations. But maintaining a prolonged blockade is a different challenge. It requires sustained naval presence, intelligence, logistics, and the willingness to absorb retaliation. Moreover, Iran's own economy depends on the strait for oil exports. A permanent closure would hurt Tehran as much as its adversaries. This suggests that blocked forever may be more of a negotiating position than an operational plan, a way to maximize leverage in future diplomatic talks. But let us also consider the worst-case scenario. If Iran were to successfully maintain a partial or full blockade, even for a few weeks, the global economic consequences would be severe. Analysts project that a sustained disruption could push oil prices above $150 per barrel, triggering inflationary spikes, market volatility, and potential recessionary pressures in energy-importing nations. Supply chains that depend on just-in-time delivery could seize up. Central banks might face difficult choices between fighting inflation and supporting growth. This is not speculation. It is a projection based on historical precedents from the 1973 oil crisis, the 1990 Gulf War, and more recent disruptions in the Red Sea. Now, let us examine the Allied refusal to commit warships. Why are key partners hesitating? There are several factors at play. First, legal concerns. Under international law, the use of force in maritime security operations requires a clear mandate, often from the United Nations Security Council. Without such a mandate, participating nations risk accusations of violating sovereignty or escalating conflict. Second, risk assessment. A naval operation in the confined, mine-prone waters of the Persian Gulf carries significant dangers to ships and crews. Allies may calculate that the risks outweigh the benefits, especially if they perceive the crisis as primarily a U.S.-Iran dispute. Third, domestic politics. In many European countries, public opinion is wary of military entanglements in the Middle East. Leaders may face pressure to avoid actions that could be seen as dragging their nations into another distant war. Fourth, strategic divergence. Some allies may prefer diplomatic solutions over military ones, or may have economic ties with Iran that they are reluctant to jeopardize. This coalition challenge is not new. The United States has faced similar difficulties in building multinational coalitions for Middle East operations in the past. What is new is the urgency. A blocked Strait of Hormuz is not a hypothetical future risk. It is a present-day crisis with immediate economic consequences. This raises the stakes for diplomatic problem-solving. If military options are constrained by Allied reluctance, the pressure to find a negotiated off-ramp increases. Let us talk about the human dimension. Behind every strategic analysis are real people whose lives are shaped by conflict. In the Persian Gulf, sailors on commercial vessels face heightened risks. In Iran, workers at oil facilities worry about airstrikes. In allied nations, families of deployed service members live with anxiety. And globally, consumers feel the pinch of rising energy costs. The human cost of escalation is not abstract. It is measured in livelihoods, in mental health, in the daily struggle to afford basics. At Power Clash Report, we commit to covering the strategy without losing sight of the stakes. We will verify before we amplify, and we will humanize before we politicize. There is also the information warfare dimension. In the digital age, narratives are weapons. The claim that Trump is panicking may serve multiple purposes for different actors. For political opponents, it could undermine confidence in U.S. leadership. For adversaries, it could signal weakness and encourage further provocation. For media outlets, it could drive engagement through sensational framing. As consumers of information, our responsibility is to seek verification, consult credible sources, and resist the urge to share unconfirmed reports. This is not about censorship, it is about clarity. We will update this coverage as verified information emerges. Now let us consider the potential paths forward. There are several scenarios. In the most optimistic diplomatic channels, perhaps through Oman, Qatar, or the United Nations, reopen, leading to a negotiated de-escalation. Iran eases restrictions on the strait in exchange for concessions on sanctions or security guarantees. In a more escalatory scenario, the blockade persists. The U.S. proceeds with a limited naval operation without broad allied support. And Iran responds with asymmetric attacks, triggering a cycle of action and reaction that expands the conflict. In a middle path, a face-saving compromise emerges. Iran allows limited humanitarian or energy shipments through the strait while talks continue, and the U.S. scales back its public rhetoric to create space for diplomacy. What about the role of other global powers? China and India, as major importers of Iranian oil, have significant stakes in the free flow of Hormuz. They have repeatedly called for restraint and dialogue. A prolonged crisis could push them to mediate more actively, or conversely, to deepen economic ties with Iran as a counterbalance to U.S. pressure. Russia, which has its own energy interests and geopolitical rivalry with the West, may seek to exploit the situation to weaken Western unity or advance its own regional influence. The international response will shape whether this crisis becomes a catalyst for broader confrontation or a test case for renewed multilateral diplomacy. So, what can you do as an informed citizen? First, stay informed through credible sources. Follow official statements from governments, international organizations, and reputable news agencies. Be skeptical of viral claims that lack verification. Second, understand the broader context. This is not an isolated event. It is part of a long history of energy geopolitics, alliance management, and crisis diplomacy. Third, engage constructively. Share verified information. Support policies that prioritize diplomatic solutions and civilian protection. Advocate for clarity in crisis communication to reduce the risk of miscalculation. At Power Clash Report, we believe that knowledge is power. Understanding geopolitical events helps us make better decisions, protect our families, and contribute to a more stable world. Before we conclude, let us recap the key points. The Strait of Hormuz is reportedly blocked by Iran, which has vowed to keep it closed. The United States is seeking allied warships to reopen the strait, but faces resistance from key partners. Oil prices have surged past $106 per barrel, with potential for further increases if the disruption persists. The claim that Trump is panicking reflects real coalition-building challenges, but may overstate operational realities. Iran's blocked forever language is a significant escalation in rhetoric, but may be more a negotiating position than a sustainable operational plan. The human and economic stakes are substantial, affecting civilians, workers, consumers, and global stability. The path forward depends on verification, restraint, and responsible communication from all parties. The choice before the world's leaders is stark. They can allow fear and rhetoric to drive policy, risking a spiral of escalation, or they can rely on intelligence, verification, and strategic patience to manage crises without surrendering to panic. History will judge this moment not by the threats issued, but by the wisdom with which they are answered. As citizens of an interconnected world, we have both the right and the responsibility to demand clarity over chaos, evidence over emotion, and truth over virality. If this analysis provided value, please like this video, subscribe to Power Clash Report, and share it with someone who needs to understand these developments. Turn on notifications so you do not miss our updates as this story evolves. In the description below, you will find links to official sources, energy market data, and further reading on this developing situation. We are committed to bringing you signal in a world of noise. Thank you for watching. Stay informed, stay safe, and remember, in a world of increasing uncertainty, clarity is the most valuable asset we have.